Okay, so do you remember this was back maybe in October, November-ish of 2017. This was one of our first nights out in college.
I
Uh,
can remember the start of it, less of the end, because I remember getting absolutely slithered.
as you do.
As you
And
do.
so the night was basically three phases. And the first was we were at one of the apartments. We were just, we were sitting around, we were drinking, we were playing, just all that fun stuff. And I think it was around maybe 11 o'clock. We went to, I think it was either Rosie Joe's or Limelight.
Yeah,
Actually,
Limelight.
yeah, Limelight was that.
That was our
And
usual haunt.
when the squad's all here. And
Yeah.
so this is when I was just sort of getting into the going outs and stuff like that. Like I'm still kind of reluctant on it, but as one of my first experiences out, I had a real good time with it. And I think we were there until around 1 o'clock, just partied away. Bohemian Rhapsody came on and Mr. Brightside, always class to put on at a disco. And afterwards, I think they finished at 1 o'clock. Now, obviously, the party doesn't stop at 1, even though the part of me was like, go to sleep. I'm like, no.
Everybody's
And
still drinking. I must continue.
yes, I drink and I know things. And so we went back to the apartment, and a part of me was like, I want something to eat before I like go in for the night. And I think everyone was like, yes. And so we split into like different groups to go out for different things. So if you're in the Botanic area at all, when you come out of the train station, and if you look to your left, there's like a pizza place.
Pizza Co. Yes.
Yes.
Oh, no.
So
Pizza
I
Co.
went there. The fellow who was in the house, I think he left our course after a bit. He went for Chinese with the others, and I
got
believe,
a
went to
Subway. I did go to Subway. I was the odd man out.
the hangover cure. I do remember another night where you accidentally dropped yours, and
Oh, me, yeah.
you were so heartbroken.
That was horrible. You just laughed. The girl I was walking home just like felt like something drop and like hit her knee. She thought it was me and was like, "Oh my Michael," and just looked and saw the sub on the floor and just me. I was pushing down with rain too, so I was just like standing there
All
with
around
half
me
a
are
sandwich.
familiar faces.
Yeah, that was not fun.
God, I was heartbroken with that. And so we all get back to the apartment and we all just sort of get our stuff out on the table. It's all a good time, we're about to settle down. And then a man was in the house. Just a man. Was it a roommate? I didn't know.
We thought he was.
Yes. And so he was up to us at the table and went, here, mate, can I borrow a slice? I was like, sure, no problem. Help yourself. And so he had a slice and went, cheers. And he walked out the door. And about 5 minutes later, your fellow who owned the apartment, I was up to him, was like, here, who's your mate who came in earlier? Mate? Like, he had like the brownish haired, really rugged hair, roommate? No, I don't know. In fact, we went out a window and like saw him in the street, like, yeah, that guy. It's like, Mark, I don't know who that is. A man came off the street into the apartment and he took a bit of my pizza.
And left wistfully into the evening.
I mean, it could have been worse. He could have murdered us, but I'm genuinely kind of heartbroken that my pizza got taken away from me, even if it was just a slice.
Best strat, a randomer stealing food. He got nowhere near my sub.
That sub was long gone. But that was what nights out are like in Belfast. I remember there was just another one where we had also come out of Limelight. This was maybe back in January of 2018. And it was just like, all right, we're going to drive you back to the apartment for the night. It's like, great, but we're going to make a stop. Sure. And what they did is that I don't know why I was in this car. I don't know why it was half one, but they pulled over and they took one of those give way or road safety signs and they gave it to me. And we started driving away in the car. And I'm just holding this sign in the Holy Lands. I'm just like, I just want to go to bed. What's going on?
I don't think I was there for that one.
Different cars, different situations. And then 50 minutes later, I was in someone else's bed, just sitting there and just wondering, well, that's my night.
I feel like I know who that was, but I don't think I was in the car at the time.
Looking back on that now, social gatherings are so weird to me because those were the highlights. Nowadays, the highlights I get from meetups nowadays is more just, hey, let's meet in the park. No alcohol.
Or, oh, that's a nice face mask.
In fairness, like, I rock a quite good face mask.
I don't have a custom one yet. I think I'm going to get a Death Stranding one. Just bridges.
Just Build yourself up one for one of those profile pictures just to look aesthetic. Just personalize it. Masks are going to be now the customizable gaming chairs of fashion now, because we can just put them on our face and we can express ourselves through it. So for me, right now, I've got a pirate themed one, so it's all green and little pirate and crossbones on, which is really good because I've just started reading One Piece, and so it's like, yes, this is exactly what I needed.
Have you seen the ones where people just get their face on the face mask?
There's one where they do horror movie villains as masks. I'd really like a Hannibal Lecter one. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Talking Crap About, the only film and video game podcast run and approved by two men who have been heartbroken by their takeaway experiences.
Not myself.
On one end of the Skype call, it is the whiskey drinker known as Michael.
Where's my whiskey?
I am your host, the Asda man, Mark. I wanted to go with Asda boy, but it was ruined my perception of me having my youth. And sadly, Peter is just a little out of the weather right now, so we just decided to go on ahead, but hopefully he might jump in at another point.
The Asda man?
Is that name trademarked? Like, is it the wrestler's name? I did want to go with Asda Boy initially, but I had that existential crisis about being considered an adult, and I've been thinking to myself, wait, can I really pull that off now? Will that come off as strange?
Yes, it would.
There was this very strange mentality I remember about A-levels where they wanted to give you this idea that you are becoming an adult, that you are making these decisions for yourself, but you still need to ask for a pass to go to the toilet.
And you can't look a certain way. Your hair's too long, Michael. You can't have a mustache.
I straight up couldn't grow a beard until after A-levels, and in fairness, like, I never really went that far with it, but I think as soon as that period was over, I was so much happier that I was properly able to, like, express myself, sense of fashion and stuff like that. Like, I remember the first day of college where, like, you know, you go into this place for the first time, you've got no clue about uniforms, and I was just like, I'm going to put on, like, a formal shirt for this. And then I saw everyone else, and by day 2, I had stuck on a Star Wars shirt, and I was like, yep, this is my place.
This is me. I was always worried about going to college because I don't have, like, a lot of clothes per se, and I was always worried, like, oh, I'm gonna go in and, like, wear the same things 2 days in a row and people are gonna think I'm weird. But everybody did it.
No, and I think that became one of the things that really hit us off for, like, similar interests, because I always saw you had, like, the Final Fantasy top and then the Last of Us one for Ellie. I think one of the things that always put me off about my own sense of fashion for a while is that so many of the clothes I got, like jeans and shirts, were specifically hand-me-downs from my brothers, and it was when I went to college I started buying shirts of stuff I was actually into, and more recently I've been actively losing a lot of weight. So I was able to go to this more formal place in Lurgan called J.R. McMahon's and got myself a more formal shirt and lighter pair of jeans. I have to say, it was a really nice feeling to feel like, you know, I was actually making a decision on what I wanted to look like, and it was a much more lighter pastel colored stuff, which I thought was like, you know, I'm really more comfortable in this than I am with the other things.
And then there's me who wears black and grey non-stop. I get it.
And they said I was the emo one for listening to Linkin Park.
Yeah, I've been called the emo one non-stop in work.
How is work going so far?
Horrible. Well, not horrible, it's just today was one of those days where you have one customer in and it just ruins your whole evening. Not in like a rude way, like they were nice, but what they left, because we buy things in, took me the whole day.
Oh, like just to work through all the details and this stuff? Oh.
Yeah, they had like 900 quid worth of DVD box sets that I had to work through.
I think there must be a certain point where you go from, oh, I haven't seen this film, to I can't look at films anymore. I just want to work through this.
Like Blade Runner, okay, granted, whenever they traded it in, I put it on hold. They got like the 30th anniversary Blade Runner box set, and I love Blade Runner. And it had like the little miniature of the spinners in it.
Ah.
And I was like, oh, I love this. It looks amazing. I'll put it on hold, but I know that they're the ones that traded it in, and I will hate it.
I think right now, I haven't had as many bad customer encounters, but I'm just going to say the Karens of the world are this growing presence. They can do whatever they want. And I had this one, maybe not today, because I got called just late last night to see if I could do a very early shift. So this was like 6 in the morning to 12:30. So this was before any customers came into the shops. And yeah, it's nice just to get the space to yourself and not have to interact with anyone. And specifically in our place, we removed the arrows for the one-way system because I just think everyone was sick of it. Like, no one followed it at all.
Yeah. Nobody's following it in my shop either.
No.
Or the masks. Very rarely do I see people wearing masks. And it's the people that you think,
Yeah.
it's people that walk in and go, you wouldn't wear a mask. And they come in the next day and they're not wearing one. Like, see, I know you wouldn't.
I'm trying my best to adapt it where I can. My mum has made a lot of fabric cloth ones for herself and her friends. She's slowly sort of adding to it as she goes along. So she made one, like I mentioned with the pirate themed earlier. She has like a little metal bit and put at the top so it like goes around the nose so I know where it is.
I need that.
Then just straps around the ears. Trial and error process. I think they call it like prototype evolution in technology and design, where you just sort of implement it more and more as it goes along. And you know what? The more you use it, the more you get used to it. But there still could be a lot of times when you're in the middle of an order and you have people breathing down your neck and you want to sort out this one basket. And it's just like, I genuinely can't breathe with this thing on. Like, it is so exhausting.
Mm-hmm. No, I haven't noticed any sort of breathing issues myself with it. But, needs must. We'll thank ourselves for it when we come out the other side of this thing.
Yeah, I'm currently spoiling myself with some of the things with the new paycheck, like, for instance, new microphone, and also fancy new gaming chair, looking aesthetic as fuck.
Red and black, very angry Joe.
This was originally up at like 130, but it was down to like 60, and I have to say I'm so glad I went with this. Like, it is so comfortable for leaning back in, and it's because like my last chair was like very standard office type, was not built for that kind of stuff. So if you leant back, crack, not just in the chair but your back. Like,
yeah, I do. Because I'm on beanbags at the minute.
The problem with it now is that every chair in the house is now crap in comparison, because as soon as I go to the sitting room to work on like writing and stuff, I'm like, this chair is crap. And where I'm having dinner, I'm just like, yeah, I'm taking this chair everywhere now. I can sleep in this chair.
I wouldn't recommend it.
I know there's one I saw, it was like up to like 150 or something, and you could attach like a little for like putting your feet up, and I went, I can't indulge myself this much.
You could definitely sleep on that one.
I'll try my best to spoil myself, especially because we've got our first section. This is Binge Report. In fairness, there hasn't been a huge amount of new stuff that's come out. I'm sort of just working through older things I've had in the background. But this is one I've actually been excited to talk about for a while. I have rewatched Avatar: The Last Airbender.
Ooh, going to the old school, old book.
Yes. This was interesting because I've loved Avatar for ages. Like, it was easily some of my favorite stuff growing up, and Korra was easily some of my favorite shows as a teenager. And this had been probably my first rewatch of the series in, I'd say, maybe a solid 5 or 7 years. And so much of that world and how you interpret these things can change exponentially. And I've had it on box set for the longest time, but I just never really had the drive to go back and watch it. Like, I think I was always just waiting for the one thing to just really give me the excuse to go back to it. And it has actually been on Netflix for a while now. I just think it's because so many people are now talking about it again. Like, it's been all over the artists I follow and just in general conversation. The nicest thing I think I can say about it in 2020 is that this show is still really good. I think you definitely notice some more cracks in the foundation. In particular, the first season, I think, is rough around the edges in that you can tell this was when they were trying to find its identity, if you know what I mean. Like, you can tell there's a lot of like the sort of kiddie humor that Nickelodeon was famous for at the time before it became, cringe-inducing. It actually isn't that bad, but I think it's because so many shows have tried to copy this very particular sort of attitude towards its characters' dynamics and humor that I think looking at it sort of unrefined is sort of an interesting snapshot of what it used to be. And also definitely a handful of CG used in the early episodes, you can definitely tell where it's like, yep, this was definitely 2005. There's this one where they're just opening a door, but I think when you view it through a modern lens, especially on like your big TVs, I'm like, oh my god, this is when the PS2 was out.
Oh my god, it looks like Resident Evil.
In fairness, like that aspect does improve exponentially as it goes along. And I really don't think much has changed in my opinion of the show itself. I think it's still really enjoyable, but you actually end up appreciating so many more of what I'm going to call the timeless elements of it. Because, yes, like I said, there are bits that have just come to show their age, but I think that was only natural because some of the effects will have lost their age because they were of a very particular era. Like this was back when we had CRT monitors for TVs and there was ad breaks. In particular, like I think the series now on Netflix does have this problem where they cut to a commercial, but they don't have the fade in. It just cuts to black along with the sound and then continues on again. Mm-hmm. When you do some of the longer multi-part episodes, especially the finale suffers a lot of this as well, where you just sort of get the hard cut to black. It is a bit jarring, but I think if you look at that through that lens, it actually isn't that bad. But I think one of the things that's always stuck with the show, especially when you come back to view it when you're older, is that you notice so many more of the subtler details of things. Like even how all the forms of bending, when you're a kid, you just see it as wavy arms, wavy stuff, shoot powers, stuff like that. And when you look into it, you really appreciate more of the details, like how each of the bending is sort of its own form of martial arts, not even in just the way it's visually conveyed with the different movements and nations, but also like there's a philosophy in a lot of it as well that I think is really interesting. Like they have the different setups for the nations of how the Badger Moles were the ones for the Earthbenders or the Dragons for the Fire Nation. Each culture forms its own sort of architecture and lore, and it all sort of builds upon itself. And coming into so many of these sort of settings, you end up appreciating so many more of not just the world building, but specifically how this all works together into the story. Like in particular, the finale is still one of my favorite sections of TV ever, especially like when the final battle begins, it like pans up behind Aang in the same shot used in the opening. And then when it actually gets to the final episode of him being attacked by Ozai and he's trapped in like the orb of like rocks, just like he was in the pilot episode with the ice. And I'm like, this show's got such good visual symmetry and it's all just flowing together so well. And I still love Zuko's redemption arc so much. I still remember so many of the individual beats of his story, but I think the one bit that's always stuck with me is the fact that he believes that honor is something that he has to regain, but it's something that's put upon him because his dad says that. And he spends so long trying to please his father before he eventually realizes through all his struggles that his real dad was there the entire time in Iroh. That show knows how to hit you where it counts, and you can still enjoy it as kids and adults and sitting with, like, let's say your younger cousins watching this for the first time. I just think it is worth, like, knowing these things before going in. And it's a nice feeling to come back to something years later and you end up appreciating it more. I'm very curious to see what my thoughts on Korra are going to be, because I think I preferred that show much more as a teenager, especially because, like, for me, she was one of those characters that really meant a lot because it was this idea that you can have this cool, confident character being broken down and slowly picking herself back up. And I do plan to talk about this more in the future, but it's just a really nice feeling to come back to Avatar after so many years and not only realize it stands the test of time, but it hits closer than ever before. And clearly I'm not the only one with this, because seeing so many people rediscover this show and people coming back to it for the first time is genuinely like really exciting to see. I'm really curious to see what the series is going forward in the future.
And I have a good friend of mine who never shuts up about Avatar. Like, you'd be on Facebook one day and it'll be, oh, he shared like a Tumblr post deeply analyzing. I've never seen it. I don't know how to pronounce his name. Uncle Iroh, did you say?
Iroh,
like,
yes.
Analyzing everything. It's like, oh, this is very interesting. I should probably give this a watch. And then I just never do because I'm too busy.
There's always just sort of things with the community itself that I think can be a put off. Like, in particular, I think one of the problems I've had isn't actually with the show itself, but how it's perceived, because I really do like Avatar. Like, I spent like a few minutes just talking about how great it is in terms of visual symmetry, how it improves with time. But I think in many ways, it suffers sort of the same tunnel vision effect as Star Wars, and I think that's because they share a lot of similar plot beats and setups to each other. I think that sort of left the series on like this high a pedestal that anything that's come afterwards gets negatively compared to it, especially Korra. Like, a lot of people like really hated that show, and who knows, I think my opinions on it might change when I eventually do that rewatch, but I think that series suffered the same fate as Force Awakens in that I think on its own it's a solid enough thing, but it's always going to be negatively compared to the, iconic piece
before,
that came before it. And like, especially with other shows, like I've had my frustration with, like Voltron attempted that sort of thing, and I got really angry with its drawn out length and how it handled a lot of its characters. There was She-Ra, which I grew to love with time. And it's interesting when you go back through a lot of the credits of early episodes and you notice so many particular creators who have like sprung up in the last few years, like Dave Filoni, who did a few episodes of The Mandalorian and a lot of Clone Wars. He directed a handful of episodes in season 1 of Avatar.
He was showrunner of the Clone Wars and Rebels, I think.
Yeah, I don't think I ever really got into Rebels as much, but I always had like that appreciation for him as a creator because he's able to take like that obscure sort of fan extended content that I'm not really that passionate about, but weave it in a way where it's like, yes, I can appreciate this as a story and it being naturally woven in. You notice there's a lot of creators in these higher up positions that would have started with Avatar and they slowly like develop more of their own skills as it goes along. And I think it is kind of fascinating to see how much that show has grown and changed people, because the testament to any good piece of fiction or art, whatever, I think is something that's still talked about. And I don't think Avatar ever left the cultural zeitgeist. I think it was more just it lost a lot of its momentum. This wasn't just due to like the film that came out in 2010. I've given my thoughts on it, but I think like that properly killed the appeal the series had, because I think afterwards no one really was into the property as much. And obviously like people love that Avatar and its universe and stuff like that, but I think it's really sad that this could have maybe have been like the next big thing. Like it could have been the MCU or the Lord of the Rings for our generation. And I think while I'm happy for what it is, I'm also kind of sad that it's never really gotten the chance to really like sprout its wings beyond that.
Killed before its time.
But you know what? For what it's worth, I'm happy I got to re-experience this show. I can't wait to show it to some of my younger cousins. And I had a little group meetup in the park recently and chatted with one of my friends who's a big Avatar fan. And it's just nice to be in love with something again.
Aww.
I need some more wholesomeness in my life. Speaking of wholesome, did you watch Umbrella Academy Season 2?
I did. Wholesome?
Yes, this is an awesome segue. Yes, what about Klaus? Our best boy Klaus.
He shat on Ben for a whole season. Oh, is Ben here? Oh no, Ghost can't time travel.
Sorry, Peter is essentially the Ben of this episode because he's invisible. He's in the background. He's just lurking, waiting for his chance to strike.
We can hear him. You can't.
Stop making that rude gesture, Peter. There's children watching.
Is there? I hope not.
Oh,
put that away.
What do you mean you don't like Avatar?
Start on him. It's really embarrassing when he does turn up.
I'm going to deal with him.
I actually preferred it to season 1, which is a rare phenomenon in Netflix brings out these things. I feel like having them separated more, and there's team-ups in this season that you didn't see last season, works with a lot more of the group dynamic. Allison and Klaus and Vanya. Oh, sweet Jesus, there you go. So here's Vanya here.
Hello.
He's here.
Uh-oh.
The Ben of our show has finally appeared.
Hello.
Sorry, it's Harry Potter. Got that wrong.
Peter, thanks for joining us. We're literally just about to start talking about Umbrella Academy Season 2. Would you like to join us?
Amazing, of course, yes.
You would.
Of course I would.
Ooh, nice glasses.
Thank you. They are blue light glasses, so
Okay,
they are
Potter.
helpful for looking at screens.
Nice.
Thank you.
Maybe I should have used those before I went irretrievably blind in my younger years.
Might have been beneficial.
Might have been.
All right, Peter, talk
Yes.
to us about Best Boy Klaus and the rest of Umbrella Academy Season 2.
Okay, right. First of all, season 2, I absolutely adored. I also love how the fact that each one of them has their own personal story, like a little bit deeper than the first one. Because the first one, you kind of like had Allison, and she was there. She like you knew that she had a kid, You knew that she was an actress, and that was kind of it. It didn't give you much, but then this one, it gave you a full backstory. Same thing with Klaus. Same thing with them all in their own sense, but it's kind of like... Except for Luther. But that's also because we got it in the first season in a way. But good boy Klaus, obviously, he had to pop off this season, you know. I love how Alison got her sense of independence as well. Alison, you can tell, kind of flexed a little bit on this season because...
Oh, yeah.
The first one, she was just like, I heard a rumor, like maybe 3 times maximum. But then this one, she was flinging it about as much as she wanted to after a certain episode or so. And I was like, yes, give me more of this.
That one scene in the dressing place, I loved that bit.
Same. I absolutely adore. It shows you more of, to get into the character. I love how it shows you a deeper development of Ben and what way he had a relationship with everyone. I like that. Because not only did it show you a deeper relationship with Ben, but it also showed you that Klaus's powers were developing as well. It was like a bond.
I mean, the whole Ben and Klaus dynamic was part that I didn't like.
Really? Why?
Not that I didn't like it. I liked the two of them together, but I hated it when the academy was all together. Mm-hmm. And somebody said, "Oh, hey, Klaus, is Ben here?" And he's like, "Oh no, he can't time travel." So they all think that Ben wasn't there for it until he possesses Klaus and Diego and Ben are like, it's been...
I think there was a weird kind of disconnect when the seasons start, because you know at like the end of season 1 when they are just about to do the time jump, and it does like that big circular pan shot where it shows them turning into their younger selves, and then it does the time jump to the 1960s where this one takes place. I didn't think it was a bad decision, but I think there's sort of points when you go back and look at season 1 and you think there seems to be at times a little bit of things they left behind, maybe either as a pullover for next season or times where I was just like, I wonder if this was forgotten unintentionally.
I don't think they could have done a whole season with children.
Maybe. In fairness, like I think one of my biggest disappointments I had with the season so far was, I wouldn't even call him the main villain, but you know the head of like the organization, the one with like the fishbowl head?
Yeah.
Like, I was really excited to see what this character was, and the few scenes we get with him I thought were really cool, but I think they were unfortunately cut short, and I think this was probably down to budget, I think, because it would probably have been hard to keep that sort of effect going. I think that even comes in at the finale as well, where you can tell I think they had to just cut things down a bit.
The finale had so much potential in my eyes. It could have been so good with all the Academy teaming up to fight the Commission, but then they just had Vanya come out and white violin the place, and you're like, oh, okay.
Yeah, like, I wanted to see a little bit of, like, more rumoring and more Klausing.
Yeah, like the opening scene when 5 shows up and the Academy is just racking the place. Alison's like, I heard a rumor, I blew your minds, and their heads fucking explode. I wanted that in the finale, but expanded.
Yes.
I thought they were setting up for it, because like, oh, Vanya has to look after Harlan, so she's going to be out of commission for this whole fight until maybe the last minute, whenever. Yeah,
basically what you're asking for an Avengers Endgame scene, but for Umbrella Academy. And Vanya is essentially the Scarlet Witch. That's what you're asking right now, isn't it?
That is exactly. I want Vanya to show up to the handler and say, you took everything from me, and she's like, I don't even know who you are.
Scarlet Witch is the most powerful Avenger for me. Remember, like, she was holding Thanos back with one hand, and like she pretty much destroyed so much of his army as well. I know it's a tangent, but I'm like, Scarlet Witch, strongest Avenger.
100%.
Going back to Umbrella Academy, for the most part, I did generally quite like a lot of the direction it took. I'm glad that they were able to put different characters in different dynamics, because I had this fear going in that it would sort of turn into another Stranger Things, where every season is very much the same kind of setup, but slightly different villains, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
I think it does very much follow a similar sort of setup. Everyone's on their own sort of journey, and I think one of the things I was more interested in is that, like, season 1 was very much the introduction to a lot of the characters, and I think in this one, it gives them the space to sort of just go into sort of new situations. And I think this works for good, and sometimes for once a little disappointed with, because the one with Vanya I was really into, because she starts off PTSD, not remembering anything, and seeing her slowly put the dots back together, and even the government accusing her of being like a Soviet spy, I thought, okay, like, I'm interested in this because, like, Umbrella Academy loves to revel in just human misery sometimes of like, your life sucks, we're going to make it even worse for you. I think that's shared across so many of the characters. Like, you had your villain in season 1 who was like the serial killer, then you had your woman who was like the head of the company come back in this one, and then she gets thrown into like Five's old desk job, and it leads to like one of the funniest opening visuals where she like froze the name tag and we get like the little Umbrella Academy logo.
Love that. I feel like I do find it very funny, though low-key kind of kidding, but also kind of funny anyway, that Vanya had a complete mind wipe of everything that happened, almost as if she always needs to be muted, but somehow miraculously she remembers that she's a lesbian. Like, that doesn't make any sense.
I mean,
can someone give Ellen Page a social distancing hug? She's just forever cursed to just play really sad characters.
Like, it doesn't make any, like, if you had amnesia, right, and you came and you were, and like, prime example, if you're gay and you had amnesia, the last thing that you would think is, you know what, that's me, I'm gay. Like, mind wipe, you wouldn't even think about it. But somehow miraculously she remembers.
Did she remember that she was lesbian, or did she just fall in love with, what was her name again?
She sort of initiated the relationship before the clearly bad relationship, I think, really became evident. Sometimes I have that frustration with maybe Allison's arc as well, because it wasn't bad by any means. I really like certain scenes, but you know how in season 1 when it wrapped up, she had lost her ability to speak. Mm-hmm. And I was really fascinated to see where they took that. And in fairness, I don't think the arc was that bad. I think, like, this is probably the first thing she would have done given the setting. But I was wondering, how did she live in those years without being able to communicate, without her power? And there's a little bit of that, but I think it's one of those things where I wish did get a little bit expanded upon. Especially at this stage, we're going to talk about spoilers for the final episode of the season. But if you would prefer to not know, you'll check the time description. You can just skip ahead. The reveal of there's another member of the Umbrella Academy, or one who would have potentially been with them, and she copies their abilities one-on-one fights. I was curious to see, like, oh, this could be like an amazing moment where like she has all their powers. It's like, wait, no, it can only be one at a time. And it is foreshadowed quite well when she has that first fight with Five, I think, in like maybe episode 6 or 7. Mm-hmm. There was points where I felt like it really could have had some more oh shit moments. Like, there are a few, like when she backfires Vanya's attack, or the one when she uses Allison's don't breathe, I heard a rumor attack on her. I was like, oh my god. But I think it was also that point where it just felt like I wish certain elements got a little bit more time to be in the oven, if you know what I mean. Especially, you know, there was like the albino assassins that came after them. The
what?
I cool was their timing for having them in some cases. I was like, okay, you needed to add them there for suspense. We get it. But like, give me something.
I like their resolution though.
Yeah, I feel like
join in the cult, like, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I feel like if they were clever with it, they could have done more meddling with the 8th member of the Umbrella Academy type of things. Personally, I don't think that she needed to have all of their gifts, because then that doesn't make them unique at all, personally.
I don't think that's what her power was. I think her power was mimicry.
Oh, T.
And that she can, like,
oh,
you know, like Rogue and X-Men.
Yes.
Like, she can take what's being used against her and flip it on them. Is what I think that her ability was.
Oh, okay. This that changes my entire point on that. Okay,
yeah.
That's
last thing I think I want to mention is that, like, we're talking about stuff like maybe that could have been expanded upon. In fairness, I think I am glad they kept certain things, like the professor, what's his name, Hargreaves. Yes, I am glad they kept him an absolute monster, because I was really dreading they give him like a Professor Snape thing where it's like, I secretly cared all along about you. I'm glad they kept him this absolutely uncaring monster. Yeah, actually, yes, a dickhead. I was dreading that they do this, but he actively points out everyone's flaws. He's constantly condescending, and I went, yes, this cynical piece of shit. I'm glad they kept him this way, because I don't want a redemption arc for him. And then, guys, that final scene, they come back and he's alive and there's a new academy and Ben is there with the ugliest mustache I've ever seen. But oh my god, that final word everyone says, oh shit, I was like, yes, that's what I'm thinking. Oh shit, boys.
That's the positivity we're looking for. That is the type of ending that you want, especially if you're wanting a sequel.
The original comic, I've read a little bit of it. Just never really clicked with me. I think like this is the power of what a good adaptation can do, because it cherry picks the elements that sort of worked on paper, and then when you apply them to film, you suddenly give it so much more life and personality. The use of music, how all the title sequences have this great synergy where it's a different appearance of the logo in different situations, depending on the context. And honestly, there were plenty of moments that really got to me. Ben's final moments with Vanya, I thought were really well done.
Yes, though, I do find it very, I don't know, a missed opportunity for, like, all of the comics had each one of them having their own set of gifts, obviously, but they have more gifts than just that in the comics, but they don't go into it in the show. Well, like, for Klaus, he has the ability to levitate and to have telekinesis and telepathy and talk to the dead in the comics.
So these are all separate abilities. Like, there's a bit in season 2 where he has Ben pick him up to give the illusion of levitation.
Yeah, he has all of those abilities in the comics. But in this one, they don't give him all of those abilities. They just allow him to talk to the dead, which in a sense you can kind of get with in the actual adaptation of it, because like Ben could be talking to a past relative that would essentially give the impression that he would have telepathy. He could get a spirit to move something, which could give the impression that he has telekinesis. And he could, similar to what happened in the show, get spirits to lift him so that it gives the impression that he...
In fairness, I loved that scene where he fools like all the people into his cult. I thought it was brilliant.
So did I. Somebody actually posted that on Tumblr, that they wanted someone to lift him so that it made him look like as if he was floating, and fully they put it in. And I don't know whether or not that's from a Tumblr post, but...
I think
would be thriving if that was the case.
Yeah, I think the last thing I want to add to like your talk about the different powers on the comics and stuff is that I think when anything gets an adaptation, especially like comics or manga or stuff like that, there is going to be a limit to the amount of stuff that you can actively portray or have the time for. Genuinely, one of my favorite manga of all time is Akira, and that obviously spawned like one of the most famous foreign films in existence, not just anime, but in the pop culture zeitgeist in general. And last year, because 2019 is the year that film is set, I rewatched it as well as reading the manga. In my opinion, like, they're both amazing pieces of work, but one of the things that really is surprising when you watch the film is that so much is left out. And it was very much a Game of Thrones situation where the adaptation was made before the original source material had finished. So it's this very interesting sort of period where you can tell the director, who did also do the manga, clearly was molding this as it went along, especially because like when you look at it, it's only really like a bit of volume 1, and then volume 6, which would come out a few years later, would come into that. And like you realize so many characters in it who get like maybe a few seconds of screen time are given like massive critical roles and like different power sets. And in many ways, like some people will say it's an incomplete adaptation, but like Umbrella Academy, I think it condenses a lot of its abilities to save time, but I think it also does help with conveying it a lot better and stuff like that.
Yeah, like, prime example, Five in the comics isn't actually able to teleport in a sense. He's able to jump through time. That can also mean that he can jump within the same second to somewhere else in the room. Does that make sense? Like, yeah. That's his gift is time jumping.
He is a TARDIS.
Yeah, exactly. So whenever Reginald turns around and says, instead of you trying to focus on jumping years, focus on jumping a few seconds and it might be beneficial. In the comics, Five can do that from day dot. Like, so
I think giving that more of a development or an arc, I think, can do a lot better for a show because you have the time to play around with it. In particular, that scene at like the finale when he does rewind it back to save everyone by just manipulating events, I thought was really well done.
Mm-hmm. It was very well done.
I think if you start looking too much into like the individual specifics, I think it can kind of ruin the experience, but I can understand that frustration of like, you know, when you come up with ideas for how like these characters with these power sets should work, but they haven't got there yet.
Yeah.
I think that's what you're saying.
Okay, fair. But I feel like the next season needs to be a development on power because it needs to be there.
Yeah.
which would be a good segue considering that they now know that there's more of them. So they'll maybe want to try and enhance them so that they get there.
As far as it goes, I was pleasantly surprised by Umbrella Academy. Like, I remember it took a while for it to really grab me. I think this season did a much better job of just luring me in from the start. Thumbs up recommendation from all of us.
Yeah, 100%.
Speaking of segues, here's our next section, Checkpoint Quest.
That was a horrible segue.
Don't worry, we always need a musical jingle just to get us through. So, before we jump into the big discussion that we're all thinking of, and that's part of the thumbnail, I've been playing more of Fire Emblem Three Houses. I think this might be my favorite game on Switch.
3 houses, more like 3 episodes. Oh.
I talked about this on the last episode. I was not expecting this to take off because I was saying I was down in Cork and I had that and the Pokemon expansion. I was thinking, you know what, I'll play a little bit of this and then I'll jump to that because both games are sort of on the back burner for me. And Three Houses just like really just stuck the landing and I started playing it all the time in Cork instead of the other one. And I think it's only because like, for me, it's a game that you get as much as you put into it. It's as hard as you want, or it's as rewarding as you want for, let's say, your character interactions and stuff like that. Because I'm all for like my big JRPG cast with all different kinds of personalities and stuff like that. And having these support conversations grow and develop between all the different students is really rewarding to see in the long run, especially because last time I mentioned it, I was reaching a critical decision in the story. So there's a point you do have a time skip. After that decision, you have to deal with the ramifications of what's happened. And this is like really effectively done in one of the battles because, to put it bluntly, you have this decision between either staying with the church that you've been with from the start, that they're the ones who are looking over the land, that you're doing their business and stuff like that, and you're raising the kids under this, or you can follow your team leader, who I'm doing the Black Eagles playthrough as Edelgard, and you can go off and do her rebellion. Now, there ain't no magisterium in my playthrough. That's a Dark Materials reference for the book nerds out there. So I joined her, and because of this, going with like the anti-religious route meant like one of my team members who was like really devoted to it actively left my team, and they became a different class altogether. And so in one of the fights early on after this, you have to fight and beat her. And I didn't care that much for Flan. I didn't think she was that strong, but it was this really sad moment where I was like, I'm having to kill so many of like these characters like I spent time with and grew to like. And maybe this is really niche. Maybe it is because this has just been the ideal quarantine game for me just to lose all my time in. I generally think just having this amount to waste away in it and just try different tactics has just been infinitely rewarding. I still got a long way to go. I mean, I'm at the 30-hour mark and I still think I've got like 5 or 6 chapters left to go. If you ever see this game on sale, I would highly recommend it, and think of it like baby's first step into this kind of genre, the same way Splatoon would be for shooters. Because like, it's easy enough to get to grasp with, but the more you mess around with it, the more comfortable you get, and the more you want to sort of dip your toe into different genres. Like, I'd be really interested to see, you know, different kinds of this. Like, I'd be curious to see stuff like XCOM and stuff like that.
Oh, have you ever played XCOM?
I've seen playthroughs of it here and there, and I think because I want to have a big step up in, you know, different visual aesthetic and also difficulty as well, but I think dipping your toes into different genres, I think, is always important just for variety, and also just sometimes you can get some really interesting experiences from it as well. And before anyone asks, yes, Bernadetta is best girl. I will stand for this till the end of my days. She is the archer, and she is the real queen of the Black Eagles. Don't at me.
I don't know what he's talking about, Peter. Do you know what he's talking about?
Okay.
All right, that's my ramble on best girl and my favorite game on Switch out of the way for now.
He said something about best girl.
That's fine.
This is the big one. We have all been playing Ghosts of Tsushima.
Tsushima.
Michael, would you like to start?
Oh my god, it's so good. It's open world, it looks beautiful. The combat is fun. A lot of people have been saying, oh, it's Assassin's Creed Japan. I think it's more like the Middle Earth games in its climbing and the combat, and it's the showdowns. It's so good. I have one gripe with it, but I'm sure we'll leave the gripes to a separate thing. Have you finished it?
I have gotten up to the start of Act 2. I think it's because I've spent so much of my time in the side villages, but also just every time there's a bird, I'm like, I guess I'm following the bird.
That's fair.
I
But,
did
okay.
but what? How are you only at the start? You know what? No judgment here on this channel.
No, I don't know about you two, but I certainly played it this way. Unintentionally, I did find out. At the start of the game, I played it as I felt Jin would act in the scenario. I tried to be as honorable as I possibly could. I never took camp stealthily. I always went head on, showdown. But at some point, without me consciously thinking about it, I started switching more into the ghost persona and assassinating people more and being sneaky a lot more. That when it finally got to a plot point where they were like, you know, you're no longer acting like a samurai, I was like, oh shit, no, I'm not. When did this happen?
I'm curious if this is going to be a thing that's tracked through the narrative itself, because the first game I was actually thinking of when I got to the first significant stealth kill was Tomb Raider 2013, because you know there's a bit in that when she's forced to kill for the first time, and it's portrayed as like this big emotional moment because like she's never done something like this before and it was so in the moment. And in isolation, I thought that bit was really cool, but there was always this real disconnect. And this has been said by so many people, like, I love that game, but as soon as that major scene happens, you can instantly go 360 no-scope every single enemy after that. For Ghost of Tsushima, I'm curious if this is going to be actively worked into it. Like, do you think there's going to be, like, you could be a Paragon or a Renegade sort of thing?
There's no, like, gameplay mechanic in that sense to it. The story is always the same no matter what way you play it. It's just myself becoming more of the ghost than the samurai as the game went on, much like Jin was experiencing himself. That was probably just me unintentionally being a mass murderer, but I feel like that was done in a really nice way.
You think it could have been as you got more technique points and you were like, oh, it's very easy to assassinate people now, especially since I've now upgraded my small knife to the max level.
The Tanto?
Yeah, as soon as you've upgraded that, which is only 3 levels, the main samurai sword is like 9. Like, as soon as you get that...
I fully upgraded everything.
Yes.
I think one of the quick compliments I can give is because I've been very mixed on this game, but I will like go more into that. I think what it does good very early on is that it pulls the same trick that the original Shenmue would have done, in that it gets you to really hate the main villain and establish like the difference between them. Because you fight like the giant mongrel at the start of the bridge and like you can't even land like an attack on him. And it's maybe even just this scratch. There's such a clear power difference between the two. It nails this really nice sense of progression. Like as you go along and you make these allies and you learn all these techniques, you really get the sense that you're learning, you're adapting to these changes. And I think the thing with the combat for me is that I rushed in trying to treat it like Arkham, the cinematic dodge, counter, stuff like that. You can definitely see shades of that, but I wouldn't necessarily consider it exactly like that, because you have to be much more patient with it. And in particular, when you have to adopt like the different stances for different sort of enemies with shields and stuff like that, I came to appreciate more of what it was, especially because like I had to be more reserved and quicker thinking than I would have compared to at the start when I sort of rushed into fights with no plan.
Yeah.
Well, that's honorable. It's so good, honestly. I need just to finish it.
Yeah,
you need to finish it. I know I have finished it.
There is a line that I need to talk about, but Mark hasn't finished it. But it perfectly exemplifies how I played the game.
Okay, how about we leave it for a spoiler cast episode? Like maybe in the next one we'll do a full talk about endings and stuff like that.
Okay. Peter, I will message you.
Okay, perfect. Do that now.
Other thing I want to mention with it as well is that despite my problems with the game, like I just think it hasn't really clicked with me as well, because I find like open world games that like have an endless supply of icons to do and just grab random items or do this stuff sometimes gets a bit mundane. Like I think I mentioned that for Spider-Man, where at least in that game, like you had the motivation to just go through with it because you're in this environment as Spider-Man. It sort of makes sense. And that very much does apply to Tsushima, but I just don't think it ever really hit me in the same way. But what I will give this game some credit is that the art direction is stunning. Like I think technically the game, it is a little rough around the edges. In particular, This is funny. Like, I genuinely laugh my head off when I think about this, but I think it also gives off the sense that there's a little bit of a disconnect. Is that, after the prologue mission, and you eventually get your own horse. So you can pick, like, any of a different color, and then you can give it a name and stuff like that. I called mine Nobu for trust. What did you call yours?
Sora.
Cool.
We needed one Kingdom Hearts reference from Michael.
No, it was because, like, sky, and he was white, and clouds,
Okay, so the thing with Nobu, perfectly nice horse, but no matter what I do, since they gave that message, this horse is with you till the end of the game, I went, okay, how far can I break this? So at one point, and I didn't do this intentionally, I very much care for Nobu, I accidentally might have jumped a little too high off a mount. And,
never mind that.
And you break his legs.
No, he's fine. He just gets up.
He gets
I have done worse.
He's a good horse. But then there was another time in the middle of a fight where he ran in and I accidentally hit him. I went, I'm so sorry, Nobu. And not a scratch, he's fine. But this was the peak of the absurdity of me trying to wrap my head around this disconnect of how the game says this, but it sort of contradicts with the world, is that, how you can call Nobu in? There was one of the side missions where I was going after this musician, and you find him in a field with a lit fire. And I called Nobu in. He doesn't actively track along with you in the environment. He just sort of appears. And so I called him, and he appears in front of me, but he runs through the campfire all around in a circle, and he runs away. Nobu is on fire. He's gonna die. No, he's not. The fire just snaps. It's out. Nobu is God in this universe. Nothing can hurt my horse. And what I'm trying to say is that the game is a little rough around the edges, but I'm just going to say, aside from the horse, like, the art direction is genuinely really beautiful, because after playing so much of Last of Us 2, where that was, like, so well detailed and modeled and all intricate animation, I think having, like, just such a lovely, colorful rural countryside was just so well needed. In particular, in photo mode, you can add particle effects, and you can genuinely feel the love for the particular subject matter in cinematic references. There's a Kurosawa mode, so like it puts it to black and white, it has static, put the characters in the original dialects, and so you can definitely feel parts of this game got clear love and passion put into it, and I can definitely feel that. I just wish I just cared more about the product overall.
I feel like this is the one gripe that I have with it. It's fallen into that open world trope that started with, I feel like, Assassin's Creed Origins, where there's very little actual cutscenes. When characters are talking to each other, it's just a static shot of each of them. And going like,
I did not like that.
Yep.
And that's a shame, because when they actually do, like, actual cutscenes related to the narrative, it does look genuinely really nice. When it first boots up and you select your mode and it pans as a one-shot down, and then we see all the mongrels and stuff, like, when it is actually narrative-focused stuff like that, I think it's really good. But there's so many of, like, incidental side missions or stuff like that where it's the same sort of static wide shot, and I went, there has to be a better way to visually convey this.
Yeah, too many games have been doing that recently, where there's no, like, dynamic conversations. If somebody's angry, they're just standing there going, I am angry at you. It's not dynamic enough when you're talking to the different characters. I don't like it. Also, it's
Mike's
like
asking for a movie that you can play.
Well, no, not that movie that you can play, but like a bit more urgency and agency in your
like
dialogue scenes.
Someone you pin them against the wall type of anger, and you can physically see them, like,
yeah,
angry.
As opposed to them just being like, yes. Well, it's not even. I was just using anger as an example. It's just not good. But then Sucker Punch always did that with Sly Cooper and Infamous. Their cutscenes were just not fluid. They were very jittery.
Yeah.
I think they got out of that with Ghost.
You can feel that frustration in how maybe this could have used some more time in the oven. I feel like I want to give this game another shot. I just think the reason it didn't click with me is that I love this thing for its aesthetics, but I don't really think the world itself has really grabbed me in the same way I was hoping to. And at times it feels a little lifeless to me. And who knows, that might just be the particular corner in the map I'm in, but who knows?
I feel like in regards to the map, that would be my only... It's not even the map is the issue, because it is very similar to Spider-Man, where there's constantly, like, marks for you to go to somewhere, and like, oh, here's a farm for you to get rid of the Mongols in. here's a quest, here's a potential landmark, it's like a lot, which is fair. However, by the map, I mean in like generally walking through it. I wish that you, once again, comparing it to one of my favorite games, where you could literally walk through the map in Skyrim and you're going to bump into somebody that could potentially be somebody that you could talk to. And it's not going to be someone that turns around and says, oh, here's this place for you to go because here's people for you to kill. It's like
the Mongol camp over there.
Yeah, it's a situation where like they'll talk to you and be like, oh, hi. Oh, you look pale. Or, you know what I mean? Like, I just want, like, I don't know. It doesn't
You just want another Yuriko to talk to, don't you? His, like, handmaiden.
Yes, I just want her.
He's just like, oh, you're not eating too much gin. I'm an adult.
Yeah, I want someone like that, but like I want all of them to be like that. Like Skyrim was perfectly able to turn around and be like, you know what, I'm going to plop somebody down here. And there is always an enemy in Skyrim, no matter where you go. So you kind of always have to be in a lookout. But if it came to like, say if you've came across this probably, Mark, whenever you're like going through some area that you know you've got completely cleared and there's like a few Mongols sitting there, you can't continue on that path if you can't be bothered to fight them, because you can't run straight through them because they'll knock you off your horse and then you'll have to fight them.
I know exactly what you're talking about, but every time I saw Mongols on the road, I got off my horse and I fought them because how dare they invade my country?
I get that, but for me, the amount of times that I did what Mark's doing at the minute and just completing everything at the bottom section of the map.
Oh, I did that before I beat the game.
So did I, yeah. I had got all the stances before I even went into Act 2 and everything, right? So I had fought so many Mongols already in the bottom half, and then I was like, wait, I have 2 more sections of this map to actually discover and go through. Mm-hmm. I'm going to calm down here.
I'm going to chill.
The Mongols that I come across now, I'm like, I don't care. The main ones will clear them out.
I think this is a game we're probably going to talk about more in the future. This might just be a thought in my head, but I'm thinking at the end of the year, we could probably do like a big episode talking about favorite films, games, and stuff like that, sort of to like wrap everything up. And I think this might be one that might end up in discussion, I think.
Like a top this type of thing.
Maybe. We'll see how that goes. I feel we're very much still trying to find our identity with the challenge, especially because we had held off recording for a bit. We were doing our own things, work and stuff like that. But we want to pursue this, with care. We want to make stuff that we like. So Peter wants another Skyrim, and I want us to move into the next section. This is Docuseries.
Slay.
I think my transition skills are getting slightly better. Yeah.
Execute it from that. Thank you. I want to move on. Bye. And I'm like,
all right. Halo Infinite's release has been delayed till 2021. I have to be honest, every time I see new footage of this game, I feel very conflicted, because I remember when the first teaser dropped in 2018. I'm going to dub it like the Planet Earth teaser, where it's just all these David Attenborough like wide shots of showing the land. When you sort of see like the little hints that this could be Halo, and then when you get the shot of his helmet and then the first piano note drops, I was like so excited, and sort of a mixture of all the Halos. So they've got slightly more open world environments like ODST. They're giving the original art style, returning back to it. And I honestly don't mind them delaying it. I'd much rather a game that is delayed be good eventually rather than one be rushed. But I also feel that the whole idea of this delay, I think, comes from the confused messaging, because the Xbox wants to market itself as like the powerful console, the thing to like push visually and to look amazing. And I think Infinite looks totally okay in the few bits we got. In fact, it looked quite fun, but I think in trying to sell it as the powerful system seller, I don't really think this is doing the job, especially when I look back at that original teaser and I see the sort of difference in visual presentation. I think maybe on a side note, this also comes from me not really trusting promotional material since 2014. Like, did you remember the original trailer for Watch Dogs?
Oh, don't talk to me about it.
That
Got
was
so
like
cry.
one of the like worst downgrades I had seen. And it wasn't even like, oh, it runs on PC, it can look this nice. Like it looked like a completely different engine was used altogether. And in fairness, I am hopeful for this game. Like I can clearly tell effort is being made to try and get Halo back to its roots. And I think in many ways going back to what made things special to begin with and modernizing it can lead to success. Like I remember for years thinking, we'll never get another Devil May Cry. I don't know what this series means. And then Devil May Cry 5 happened, and I was like, wow, I'm so glad this is here and it's still fun. Because like we had years of stuff like Bayonetta thinking like, we'll never reach this again, but I've been proven wrong before. So who knows? I'm curious to see where this goes. Sam Fisher announced as the next character for Rainbow Six Siege. This has sparked a lot of people to get mad because I think this comes from how it was conveyed. Because remember that serial killer game you talked about a while ago, Peter? I think it was Dead by Daylight.
Yes.
There was one they did recently, and they had Silent Hill characters in it.
As an update.
Yeah, and it was one of those things where it's like Silent Hills is a series that had been long dormant for years and it suffered so much, and like people were thinking, is this a new game? And they said, no, it's a little side thing for this. Not bad by any means, but you also feel this really annoyed sense of where the hell is like this series trying to make a comeback. The last Splinter Cell game I think was on the 360. I think it was Blacklist, I think.
Wasn't too bad either.
I just think it's like that's part of the whole Tom Clancy brand, and it's expanded out so much in the last few years, and I'm not really sure what like that future is right now. And like I said, it's likely any series could make a comeback under going back to its roots and stuff like that, but really I think the way in which this was handled was just really baity, if you know what I mean. It just sort of felt like they were trying to get fans in from one property into another when that original one just wasn't really getting the comeback it deserved, if you know what I mean. Rocksteady teases new Suicide Squad game as well as a potential new Arkham title, Gotham Knights. Michael, you told me the title of this Suicide Squad game. Can you please just say it again out loud?
This was on Comic Book Resources. Apparently the name of the panel in which they're going to reveal more about the game is called Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League. Would you like some knife with that edge?
It's so edgy you could cut bread.
You know what? I don't need your negativity coming from Suicide Squad. I enjoyed the movie. I'm going to get judgment in here, but you know what? I enjoyed it. I always enjoy things that might the same week as my birthday. And I don't need your negativity.
That shit's biased.
So is Skyrim that one exception because it wasn't at your birthday, but you're like, I still love it?
Yes, because it was out 11/11/11.
I'm allowed.
I remember the last game marketing that really was able to capitalize on that before Skyrim was Modern Warfare 2, where it was like 9909.
Call the police!
I'm cautiously optimistic for this. I loved the Arkham games. They were easily some of my favorites, and Knight was the main reason I finally got the system for this generation, because I was just holding off for like just that one title. And in fairness, like I've been wanting to do a big replay of them for a while now. I'm not really sure how I'm going to feel about it now as an adult, but this team has made some like exceptional stuff in their time, and I'm really curious to see what comes from this, as well as like the Suicide Squad game is being done, I think, by Warner Brothers Montreal. Like they did Arkham Origins, which I've always had a soft spot for, and there was a tease in that for a Suicide Squad game way back in 2013. So who knows? I'm curious to see where this goes.
I am so excited now.
You look at.
I think this is going to be its own like separate thing, though. Like I don't think it's connected to the film you're thinking of, but you know, it's still Suicide Squad.
Not the issue. I just need it. I'm forever a person that always plays.
I don't need it.
Yeah, like in Infamous, I always played like the good side of it. If there's any games where it has like the good decision or the bad decision, I always pick the good one, depending on whether or not I feel like it's true to the character.
Same here. I did that for Arthur Morgan in Red Dead 2, so I sort of played him down the middle. I'd have him be nice to people on the camp, except for Micah. Fuck Micah. and then maybe help the occasional stranger on the streets. He's sort of just down the middle, but then there's the big reveal that happens halfway through his story, and I then actively try to play him as like a better person.
Yeah.
So I'm curious if they do more of these kinds of implementations, if they try to get people to be good or bad in their playthroughs.
See, that's why I would want to play Suicide Squad. I would play it chaotically.
A chaotic
he just wants his release.
Yes.
Well, he's been good for too long. He wants to murder people.
Literally, I want there to be a purge.
Lock up your sons and daughters. Peter's on the town.
Jesus
literally.
Christ.
Okay, last bit of news to wrap the night up, and honestly, this one is kind of a heartbreaker for me, but the Last Airbender creators have walked out on the Netflix live-action adaptation.
I didn't know there was one. I know there's a Cowboy Bebop Netflix adaptation.
I think that's been on hold for a while now. The Avatar announcement, I think, happened back in 2018. At the time, and this was still long before I actively started paying attention to how productions were made and stuff like that, I always felt that Avatar had this timeless quality to it. Peter, I know you weren't here for the first bit when I was talking about rewatching Avatar, but certain bits of that series for me were kind of starting to show its age, but that was only natural because of technology advancing and, how things are presented and stuff like that, especially in the formats it was done on Netflix. And I don't want the quote grown-up version of Last Airbender. I don't want a Witcher version of this where everyone swears and there's blood and stuff like that. I really don't think that was necessary. And this is only really going off what was specifically said. I think Netflix wanted to try and make another Witcher or a Game of Thrones, which is the popular aesthetic or trend to go for. And I'm curious to see how you interpret source material in different ways in different time periods, but I think there's a difference between being adult and being mature, because when you hit 18, you're essentially considered an adult by society. That's just how it's deemed. And there's so many stuff that wants to pretend to be an adult, that it does swears and it does stuff like this, but it's not really mature about the subject matter, if you know what I mean. And the thing with Last Airbender and to Korra as well, it was intentionally aimed for a younger audience, but it was mature in the way it handled a lot of its topics.
Yeah.
And so I do not have hope for this anymore. I always want to give productions benefit of a doubt. I want creators to give their chance, to make unique stuff. But this is not the first time this has happened since, the two main creators have not been respected with their vision. If you look back on it, they were credited as executive producers on the live action film back in 2010. They admitted they had nothing to do with it, or very little input. It was the same with Christopher Nolan saying he had practically nothing to do with the Man of Steel. He was literally just there because they went, hey, this is a marketing tool, we can put your name in. And Avatar is timeless. These characters are timeless. These stories will forever be timeless and will always have positive effects on us. I really wish Avatar, with its current resurgence, is remembered for what it is and not a crappy money-grabbing attempt to make it into something else that it's not. I'm sorry if that was genuinely such a downer note to end on. It's just been something that's been on my mind a lot. Michael, you wouldn't have been into Avatar like me or Peter, but the idea that creators aren't involved or originators are being out of their project just is not really a promising sign.
Oh, it's absolutely bald. The Percy Jackson movies that Fox made years ago have very little influence from Rick Riordan, and it shows it in the end product. And even he's come out and said that is not my characters. That is not who I made all those years ago. Which is why the series now has him being at the helm of it. Thank God, not at the helm of it, but very in the process.
Yeah, because I remember those movies. They were made by the guy who did the first Harry Potter films because they wanted their brand of that when every studio wanted their version of it. New Line did that terrible Dark Materials adaptation. Weinstein's company did that Alex Rider film that I genuinely despised just to fit into the trend. And sometimes, creators have their voices heard, other times they're not. And I think that's specifically because Avatar has such a vocal minority that love it. And I love it. But I think it is genuinely really sad to see that years later we still aren't getting the series that we love. It's still just being molded by like higher ups that aren't really appreciating it for what it is.
Yeah, personally, I don't even think that you would need to remake it or do it again. I feel like if they were to even remaster it and do it, like literally do the exact same thing, but just make it with today's technology, that would be fine.
Oh, so like give it maybe a core treatment where it's in HD and stuff like that?
Yeah, exactly. And like fix the aspect ratio, maybe up the quality in regards to the animation, and like just like revamp it like that, rather than having to make it live action or without having to make it like completely like change the whole thing, like the last Airbender movie. Like,
don't talk about that.
We don't need to talk about that, but we all know what we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what you're on about.
It doesn't exist. It's the redheaded stepchild of the Avatar universe. Honestly, I think that's all we have to say on it right now. I think just it sometimes sucks to see something that you've loved for years just not really get the proper appreciation it deserves. But you know what? The original series is still there. It's still close to our hearts, and it will be available for us. It's better to go back and appreciate the things that are still there, and lucky that we have in our lives. And I don't really think there's a positive or a negative note to end this on. I just think in times like this, it's better for us to remember the good old times, and the things that were special to us at a point could also still mean something to us years later. And I've talked so much about Avatar in this episode, not just at the start, but also here. It's good to have escapism. It's good to have like topics to go over. And you know what? We'll always have the original. It's always going to be there for us.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's going to wrap us up for tonight. Thank you for listening with us. I do apologize for the audio quality. I'm currently working off a new setup. We're trying to sort of get our own mics for everyone, and we're still adjusting with current changes and stuff like that. But if you have liked what you've heard so far, we're up on Instagram, Facebook, Bebo, MySpace, Wendo Lives Messenger. Keep listing them relevant social media pages off.
Hotel, Guy Online.
Oh God, Guy Online.
Yelp. We're in the phone book.
Tinder.
Tinder. Take Bumble as well.
Sure. I'm gonna do the like, follow, share, subscribe thing. I'm gonna end this with a question. Pineapple on pizza. What's your thoughts on it?
100%. Yes.
Fuck no! Get out of here! You're
That's it, guys. I've been cancelled. Michael wants me off.
Like
Stay safe.
pineapple on pizza.
Yes.
Bye.
Bye.